Approaches to End Homelessness webinar. It is 11 a.m. and we have 21 participants in attendance, which is truly exciting. We'll probably have a few more folks jumping on here in the next couple of minutes. But in the meantime, I thought I could get us started with introductions. It looks like some folks have already started to type their full name and their job title and the organization that they work in the chat box. We want to encourage you, if you haven't already done that, to please do so. Again, full name, title, and organization into the chat box. We are recording these sessions, and both the recording and the supporting docs, which include the PowerPoint presentation, in addition to any other handouts that are provided by our guest speakers, will be available on our Continuum of Care website. I'll start off by just quickly reminding you about the purpose of our webinar series before we jump into the agenda for today. The webinar today is designed to provide us with an overview of Riverside County's emergency shelter system. We have a lot of experienced agencies that you will hear from today who have developed good models that are evidence-based and align with both state and federal guidelines to ensure that people who are experiencing unsheltered homelessness can access shelter quickly and connect with supportive service staff on site to quickly regain permanent housing. When it comes to the webinars in general, again, this is truly an opportunity for local providers who do the day-to-day work to highlight the different programs that they administer. Again, we share this quite often, but I think it's important to note that there is a lot of good local talent and expertise here in Riverside County, and we want to make sure that we provide you with an opportunity to connect and learn about all that good work. So perhaps in the future, that may allow you to partner with a specific organization or to implement a new, whether it's a housing project, a supportive service model, but anything that would help advance our work in ending homelessness. The webinars, again, are recorded, and if you have an interest in a particular subject or would like to speak on a cool project that your agency is working on, please feel free to shoot us an email at coc@rivco.org. And with that, we'll jump into the agenda for today. I'll quickly start by introducing myself because I realize I jumped in and I'm making a lot of assumptions here that folks know about our department and agency. My name is Tanya Torno. I'm the Deputy Director for the Continuum of Care Division, which falls under our county's Housing, Homelessness Prevention, and Workforce Solutions Department. You'll always hear me say that I truly believe we are one of the best departments out there. Absolutely not intending to throw any shade across other departments. I just think that the work we do is really cool because it allows us to work with like-minded individuals who have a shared passion in helping alleviate poverty in Riverside County. So on this call, we have a lot of members from our team. And so I just want to give out a shout out to Melanie Wilson, who has been instrumental in making sure that these webinars remain available, that we are consistent in our approach in creating a space that is inviting to both those that are speaking and those in attendance. So thank you, Melanie, for all the good work. We know there's a lot of time and coordination, a lot of going back and forth to ensure that we have the slides available, but also that we have the right person to speak at these. So what do we have on the agenda for today? Lots of good stuff. I see that I'm already over my time for the welcome piece. So we'll quickly jump into hearing from Laura Gonzalez, who is our social service planner, and many of you have worked with her in our planning for the annual homeless point in time count. And I'll be joining her to give a broad overview of Riverside County's emergency shelter system. Shout out to Linda Rogers from Valley Restart, who really encouraged us to focus on this subject this month and gave us some ideas on the best way to program today's agenda. We'll also be hearing from Coachella Valley Rescue Mission. Mark McGowan, Emergency Shelter Manager, is on the line and ready to talk about all that they're doing. And then we have an incredible team from Path of Life Ministries, Rusty Bailey, who is the CEO, in addition to Leonard Jarman, VP of Homeless Solutions, and Casey Jackson, COO. And then we'll end our presentation series with Valley Restart and hear from Linda Rogers, the executive director there. We want to encourage you. We do always save some time at the end for questions, but we would strongly encourage you to use the chat box function so that as speakers are presenting, type in your question. You do not have to wait until the end. A lot of speakers actually appreciate being able to view your questions in the chat box, and it kind of helps influence the direction they go with their presentation. So please do type in your question into the chat box. So with that, if all is well, we'll jump in and I will hand it off to Laura Gonzalez Rivera, again, our social service planner, who will get us started providing an overview of Riverside County's emergency shelter system. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Good morning to everybody. We thank you for taking some time to join us today to learn a little bit more about Riverside County's emergency shelter system. Go ahead and move to this next slide, Melanie, please. And so the broad overview of Riverside County's emergency shelter system is really focusing on emergency shelters and their importance when it comes to a community's immediate response to homelessness. So you can say it's an important component, as most of our panel will agree, along with the entry to the homeless system, which includes the coordinated entry system and prioritization of clients, and really focusing on homelessness prevention, and then also as well as the housing interventions that Riverside County is able to offer. Next slide. So we're talking about shelters today, and really why are they so important? And once again, I am sure that a lot of our speakers today would agree that the reason why they are running these shelters is because everybody that is part of our community always is going to need, and it is, we can say, a right for them to have a safe and decent place to go when they are having a housing crisis. And really, we've seen some of the research that really confirm that an effective emergency shelter will definitely impact the average length of homelessness, exits to permanent housing, and returns to homelessness. So those are really the reasons why these shelters are so important for our community. Next slide. We wanted to share a little bit of information about the last about 7 months and kind of what we have seen in some of the emergency shelters, data that is collected through our HMIS system, and some of the data that is collected includes the household composition, and I'll let you read through that, but this really gives us an idea of where we should focus our efforts and our housing interventions. And you can see the numbers really speak to the need for emergency shelters in Riverside County. I'll give you a second. Was there a question or a comment? Okay, that's okay. We also collect clients served by age group, length of stay, which you can see average length of stay is 47 days for Riverside County's numbers. And then I think we have one more slide. And then the exit destination breakdown. So once again, we use this information to really guide us in terms of planning and understanding the needs of our community. Okay, we can move on to the next slide. We thought that this was a very interesting data or information about who is accessing our shelters and the reasons why people avoid shelters. Some of these, for a lot of us, make sense. Some of them a bit surprising, but as you can see, they are too crowded is the top reason why individuals would avoid shelters. I know even with the youth population, we have seen that a lot of the shelters may not be meeting the needs of youth, and so they'd rather, they avoid the shelters. Not completely, but we do know that youth tend to avoid them. Other reasons, bugs. There are too many rules. They are full. I'm sure the panel can talk about some of the reasons why they know people avoid shelters. Also, in terms of pets, we've recently added that question in our point-in-time count survey to determine whether individuals actually do refuse services because of their pets, and we know that that's a big reason why they would rather be in the streets with their pet than go into a shelter without their pet. So we thought this was a really interesting slide to share with you all today. Next slide. And I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Tanya so she can talk a little bit about the important shelter components that we see are included in a lot of our shelters. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Before jumping on to the different shelter components, I was hoping just to note some of the highlights from the data report that were shared earlier. I think as we begin to plan for new responses to homelessness, it is important to consider take a deeper look at, who are we currently serving in emergency shelter, in addition to, household composition, race, age group, and then, of course, also looking at other measures like the length of stay and the exit destination breakdown. So I'm going to be sharing some information in percentages, just because I think sometimes that it's easier and it kind of helps us get a better picture of what we're looking at. But when it comes to household composition, of the 5,000 plus individuals who have accessed our emergency shelters from July 1st of 2020 through today's date, 69% are household members without children. So these are adults who are 18 and older. 22% are people with children, or are families with children. So overall, we can see that the vast majority of people who are accessing emergency shelter services countywide are adults 18 plus. When we look at race, and again, this is provided, and the slides will be available after the presentation, 69% of individuals who are accessing emergency shelter are white, and 24% are African American. In addition to those stats, the other indicator we looked at was age group. And this one for me definitely resonated because our continuum of care has had a lot of conversations about serving youth. And what we have found is 21% of the individuals accessing our emergency shelter care system are between the ages of, so they're, 0 years to 24 years of age. The other large group at 20% are adults who are between the ages of 25 to 34 years old. In regards to the length of stay, Laura spoke to this, but the vast majority of people who are accessing our emergency shelter do so for a very short period of time, for less than 30 days at 52%. And then when we look at exit destinations, I think this is definitely where we should spend some time, or look at spending some time in our continuum of care meetings to brainstorm on, how we can make improvements, because, right, we're always looking at how do we raise the bar, how do we make sure that all the different housing interventions that we offer truly lead to permanent or destinations to permanent placements. When we look at emergency shelter, of the 5,000 plus people that have been served, 55% are exiting to a temporary destination. So that means, right, they may be going from emergency shelter, then going to stay to, and unsecured is the word I will use, stay with maybe a friend or family member. We see a lot of couch surfing. For those of you that have done this long enough, we're familiar with that term. And only 22% are exiting to what would be considered a permanent housing destination. What's important, and I think what we'll hear from our different emergency shelter providers, is that each shelter program offers a different model, and many of the people who are accessing our emergency shelter systems are, right, we know, one, they're accessing it for a very short period of time, less than 30 days. And, there may be an opportunity for us to figure out, how do we use that, the question here is, how do we increase the relationship with the client during that short period of stay, so that we can better facilitate good connections that result in self-sufficiency and permanent housing. So again, we really wanted to make sure that we provided a good snapshot of who's accessing our emergency shelter, so that we can continue towards this path of constantly evaluating our data to determine where do enhancements need to be made, and what do those enhancements look like. I'll jump over now to the important shelter components, and I'll be very, very brief in that the shelters, as we know, allow for clients to access immediate and low barrier housing in a very safe environment. All of our shelters, for the most part, have great client to staff ratios. And when I say great, you're usually looking at one staff member for 30 clients. Most, if not all, of our shelters have aligned their practices with housing first and harm reduction models. So they're not contingent on certain participatory requirements, such as requiring them to maintain sobriety, and usually any former or previous criminal records are waived unless there's any recent violent activity, because in most settings, people are living together or staying together in a congregated setting. There's been a major focus on ensuring that as people access emergency shelter, where previously it was, okay, you're going to stay here and you're going to access a bed, and then, for a short period of time. Now there's this true focus, and you'll hear that from our speakers today on, how do we ensure that this short-term stay results towards a permanent housing connection. And our shelters do this by working with our coordinated entry system, so that individuals accessing shelter are VI SPDATed. They participate in an assessment that adds them to the county's by name list. And I think most of all, what I feel very proud of and very confident of is that all of the emergency shelter providers that participate in our continuum of care offer services to households of any configuration, and so by nature serve individuals, whether they're youth or young adults, domestic violence victims, single parent or two-parent households, in addition to LGBTQ individuals. So I think as a continuum of care moving forward, it's really important for us to look for these types of training opportunities, so that we can provide a realm of educational topics that help ensure that we're all prepared to receive these various different types of subpopulations. Because in today's world, and as the stats have shown, even if you are a youth operated shelter, or you serve the general population, like if you're a general shelter, you're going to serve youth anyway, right? So how do we help equip you, prepare you, and provide you with the tools to help youth who are accessing your services to other systems of care where they can receive various supports. So with that, we'll jump on to the next slide, and we will introduce Mark McGowan with the Coachella Valley Rescue Mission. Mark, please feel free to unmute yourself, and I'll go ahead and pass on the mic over to you.
Hi, Mark actually was not able to be here, but my name is Alba Perez. I'm a program assistant here at the Coachella Valley Rescue Mission. Next to me is Mr. David Douglas, and he is the supervisor for the emergency shelter. So we're actually going to be presenting our slides for Mr. Mark McGowan today.
Sounds good. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for giving us this time. So we have 80 beds available for men, women, and children here at our emergency shelter. We do have separate sleeping areas and showers for men and women. Here our clients get clothing, toiletries, laundry services. They get 3 meals a day, lockers to put in their stuff, bus passes, and we do have a case manager for the men and the women to help them, with their paperwork and to case manage them. Our emergency shelter, the program that we have there is called New Beginnings, and it's a 14-day program before entering our residential programs, which is our new live gateway for men and women separately, and our women's family programs at a separate area of mission. Due to the COVID-19, as you know, this past year has been a little bit different for all agencies. We've had to adapt to the pandemic. Our intake hours have been modified to Monday through Friday from 9 to 2 p.m. and we are closed for intake on weekends and holidays. Next slide, please. So the eligibility or the process that needs to be followed for the program requirements is when referred by another agency, the procedure needs to be, the proper forms need to be filled out and sent to Mr. McGowan and Mr. David Douglas, which is the emergency shelter manager and the emergency shelter supervisor. They will process the application, run a background check, and make sure the client meets CVRM admission criteria. CVRM does not accept clients with certain violent felonies and crimes against individuals, especially against women, children, and older people. If a client is approved, they will receive an approval code, and then the agency must transport the client door to door to CVRM. Again, due to the recent coronavirus pandemic, we have added some protocols that need to adhere to CDC guidelines. So they do need to provide or approve of a negative COVID test result that has been done within the past 24 hours. I mean, their temperature is checked, things like that, to make sure that they're good to come in to do their intake. Next slide, please. Okay, again, so our case managers will help our clients when they come in to obtain the necessary documents, the very basic documents that we need to do any, if we want to file for Medi-Cal, things like that. So the case managers will help them with their California driver's license, Social Security card, birth certificate, and then they will help them get assistance such as SNAP, DPSS, EDD, Medi-Cal, Cash Aid, etc. We do help them to access to SAC Health System. We do have an on-site clinic for health and for mental, for non-emergency medical care and referrals. Access to CVRM Housing Department for help with housing options, rapid rehousing, etc. And referrals into CVRM long-term residential programs, such as our Gateway and New Life. CVRM refers to outside agencies when applicable. And I believe that's all of our slides. If there's any questions or comments, Mr. David Douglas, our supervisor, will answer those for you.
Hello, I have a question. This is Laura Gonzalez. Do you see or do you service a lot of young individuals, like young adults and even unaccompanied youth, 16 or 17-year-olds?
No, we don't.
Go ahead.
Not at all. If they're accompanied by their parents, yes.
Okay.
But not on the female side. On the female side, if the oldest the child can be is 12 if it's a female, if it's a male.
Accompanied by an adult.
Yes.
Okay. So if they are unaccompanied youth, then you refer them to another agency like Operation Safe House.
Yes, we do.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Are there any other questions? you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself. And we would love to hear from you. I'm sure CVRM would as well. If there are no questions, and that's okay, and you may think of a question as the rest of the webinar goes on. Again, we do have those extra 10 minutes at the end.
I have a question.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Lieutenant James from the Salvation Army, Hemet. Hi, Linda. I just got a call from a police officer. He's in Hemet, and he has a grandma who's 64 with a son or a kid who's 16 years old, been staying in their car. Rather than text chat everybody on this call, I was curious what would be the first resource. This is a good on the ground question right here. What would be the first resource somebody would tell me? And I don't know if Linda has any spots available or anybody else does, but I told them to meet me at 8 in the morning tomorrow, and the officer's going to make sure they get over to me, and I'm going to see if I could point in the right direction.
I would say the Valley Start, refer them there.
Thank you, James. So I think when you mentioned Linda, I'm thinking you were thinking of Linda from Valley Restart, because this family, right, grandma and 16-year-old, I think, is it the grandchild,
Yes.
are currently homeless in the city of Hemet, correct?
Yes, I guess she came upon custody of them. She was awarded custody recently, and now they're in the car. So, yeah.
Yeah. So I know that Valley Restart has a street outreach team. We also have other street outreach teams through the county's Housing Authority Department and the county's Behavioral Health Department, HOPE team, that we can reach out to see if they can meet with this family and facilitate a linkage to an emergency shelter program. So we are happy to do that and help facilitate that connection. When I say we, the continuum of care. So James, I don't know that I have a phone number for you, but I do have an email for you. So you'll be getting an email from me here shortly, so that I can get some more specifics about the location, and we can help facilitate that linkage. Happy to do so, and I appreciate you taking advantage of today's webinar to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was going to be in it anyway, and I got the call while I was on listening to this last guy talk, and I thought maybe he mentioned a resource while I was trying to hear the other call. So thank you for sharing that. And Linda just messaged and said she can do an intake tomorrow, and that's wonderful. So thank you guys for your help. Of
course you did. Knowing Linda, she would be quick to jump on that. I do see that we have a hand raised from Greg Rodriguez. Greg, will let you ask your question.
Yeah, thank you, Tanya. Good morning, almost afternoon, everyone. I just want to, as one who lives in the Valley and has worked closely with CVRM, give them a huge shout out. I think especially as the focus turned to a Housing First program, their adaptability has been quite amazing in, coming from just primarily a shelter for many, many years and shouldering the burden for the county outside of Riverside for a lot of our homeless clientele. But I also want to add one other thing where they've been able to step up in the last couple years. We've been running a summertime, basically overnight cooling center. People don't realize that a lot of homeless individuals actually die during the night because of the issues of heat during the day. And so they've really stepped up the last 2 summers under contract through primarily Coachella Valley Association of Governments. A lot of help from the county through CARES Act funding this past year, and hopefully working on some ESG funding, but have really been able to adapt and basically open 3 small mini shelters, overnight shelters in 3 of our West Valley cities, as well as dealing with case management and housing placement as well. So just wanted to highlight some of the other work they do outside of their physical structure in Indio.
Greg, I want to say we appreciate that. We really thank you for the compliment, okay?
Great, thank you. Greg, thank you, CVRM. Thank you, James, for sharing information about that case so we can help facilitate a service linkage for that family. We'll go ahead and jump over to hear from our next speaker. We will be hearing from Path of Life Ministries, and they have a dynamic trio that will be speaking. I believe Mayor Rusty Bailey will be starting us off.
Former mayor. That's even
mayor.
better than being the mayor. That's
Former mayor and new CEO of Path of Life Ministries will be starting us off. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Tanya, for including us and inviting us. And as was mentioned, I've worn a few hats in my life, and in the Army, started out in the Army, and then went to the city, as was mentioned. But now my home is at, and my seat is at Path of Life Ministries as the CEO, the Chief Encouragement Officer, is truly my title and on my business card. And so I want to encourage you all, just in the frontline work that you're doing, and we heard it just a second ago, and it's just awesome that this community would jump on this service need in an emergency situation. And so awesome, Salvation Army Lieutenant James, for bringing that up and feeling comfortable for doing that, because this service industry, lives are on the line. And you just reminded us of that. And so thank you. In my devotional this morning, we are a faith-based nonprofit organization at Path of Life. In my devotional this morning, how good it is to sing praises to our God. And I just want to sing the praises of all of you that are on the front lines doing this incredible work, from the top to the bottom. And we just saw evidence of that. So praises to you at the Salvation Army, Lieutenant James, and for Valley Restart jumping on and that. It just reminds us of the emergency situation that we're in. And we're talking about emergency shelters today. And so we're going to give you a Path of Life Ministries, some similar information that you just heard from Coachella Valley CVRM Rescue Mission. And I'm by the way, CVRM, thank you for what an incredible picture that was. I'm jealous. I'm confessing to you all today. I'm jealous of your building. What a piece of art that is. In the middle of the Coachella Valley, and what a beacon of hope you are to the least, the last, and the lost in the valley. We hope to someday be the same in terms of our physical presence and facility, in terms of our shelter. That just really impressed me today. I hadn't been out there yet, and I want to come out and take a tour. So Casey's going to help out. Just again, we're part of a family here, part of an overall team, linking arms. Leonard can't be with us today. I know many of you know our Chief Solutions Officer. I'm repurposing or renaming his VP of Homeless Solutions to Chief Solutions Officer. His mom fell today, so he's taking care of his mom. So talk about emergencies and supporting each other. So Leonard can't be on today, and so Casey Jackson, our CAO, and myself are gonna be seconds to what Leonard would be able to provide you in terms of information, because he's been with Path of Life since almost the beginning. I think in the early 2000s, Casey came on in the last couple of years, and I've just been here over a month. But as mentioned before, I have been, and you'll see pictures of my experiences as a homeless person. Somewhat, I did have a shelter. I should say not homeless, but I had a shelter that I lived in. And as mayor, and in my efforts in combating homelessness in the city of Riverside. So next slide there, you can see the mission of Path of Life Ministries: rescue, restore, rebuild, and I'm going to add redeem as a faith-based nonprofit. That's our mission. Those three things. So rescuing people off the streets, as you heard today, others are doing that every day, rescuing them, saving lives, restoring them to community in a shelter or in housing. Ultimately to rebuild their lives, get them towards self-sufficiency with a job and permanent housing, and then redeem them to their Creator. Next slide. And then Casey, you jump in Casey's going to clean up after me or correct me, interrupt when you need to. She's going to talk more about the specifics, the beans and bullets, as we say in the Army. I'm going to talk about kind of the mission statement again, and the overall, the strategic things that Path of Life does. And then I'll talk about my experiences at the end. like I said, of being a part of the homeless sheltered community. So here's our promise. Again, self-sufficiency is what we're here to do. That's the efficacy that Tanya was talking about. Thanks, Tanya, for reminding us of our purpose, again, is to continue to develop those relationships towards self-sufficiency at the end. And that doesn't go away ever. You know, those relationships last for a lifetime and beyond. And so thanks again, Tanya, for reminding us of that. Next slide. You see what we've learned. I'm not going to read it to you all. I'm preaching to the choir in many respects. It's an incredible problem that we are associating ourselves with, that we are addressing. And I don't take that lightly. If you've heard me speak before, crisis is all hands on deck. When you say the word crisis, that means the fire alarms are ringing. Ambulances, police cars, fire engines are responding. And so that's what we're in, and that's what we do. And so I appreciate, again, I just sing the praises of all of y'all out there, as they say in Texas. So next slide. You heard about harm reduction, housing first, housing problem solving. I'm not gonna go through that, but we're a part of that. We believe in that as well. Next slide. Here's our current service projects. We're countywide in some respects, but we have are focusing our efforts a little bit more now on the Western Riverside County region. But we do have a few programs remaining in Eastern Riverside County, and we do some things countywide. Hopefully you all know about the Landlord Locator Service. Casey can talk about that. I think it's called Landlord Link. It's a website that we have stood up over the last year or so through some funding. Thank you to I believe it was HEAP funding that helped us do that. So we want to make sure that you all know that resource. If it's not in the slides today, Casey can put that into the web, into the meeting chat room, so everybody knows that there is that Landlord Link, Landlord Locator Service for everybody out there. Next slide. Casey, you want to jump in here and talk more about the beans and bullets and the specifics of what Path to Life Ministries does?
Right. So we wanted to share just our last year's impact. We're just pulling together our mid-year numbers recently, but we're pretty much on target to meet a lot of these numbers again. We currently have the community shelter with 85 beds. We have the emergency cold weather shelter, which had 55 beds last year, but this year we have 40. We also did operate last year our CVAG, the crisis stabilization units that are now CVAG themselves are operating. And then we have the family shelter, which has 46 beds now. We went through a family shelter rehab and they reconfigured the beds there. So we offer case management, meals, showers, laundry, and having started partway through the year at 24 hours for our family shelter, and now we're 24 hours across all 3 shelters that are currently open. Last year, we supported at our community shelter and cold weather and CVAG shelters, the 1,453, you can see that there, about 18% exited to permanent housing, and about 51% from our CSH units exited to permanent housing, which is I think many times is actually a bonus, and I think that Greg Rodriguez can even speak to the fact that crisis stabilization units have them in an apartment temporarily. So I think even just having that experience has allowed for more opportunities to go from there to another apartment or house. Family shelter, we graduated 57% of our shelter guests to permanent housing. Families do tend to have a little bit more motivation to get into permanent housing and more opportunities. And so we see a larger number of our shelter guests at our family shelter exit to permanent housing. Our housing, I won't go too much into the other programs we offer unless they touch our shelter program, but we do have our 2 housing programs, and you can see our statistics there. Our outreach teams are now located exclusively in Jurupa and in Riverside, the city of Riverside. We try to send out a couple of them, when we need to help move people into their new homes to other regions, but primarily they are serving right now in Harupa Valley and in Riverside. And then our LINK program is also an extension of our outreach program. They serve at the different churches that we partner with. And so they've had quite an extensive contacts because they help serve at the meal programs and offer things like, well, we just launched the Showers of Hope, which a church can arrange for a mobile shower unit to arrive on their campus, and then we offer other resources. And some of the partners in the CoC have offered resources for those times as well, like clothing and different things. We have our behavioral health team. We still have our students offering services to our participants. And then we have our employment team who offers direct placements. We have partnerships with Goodwill and Amazon for direct placements, as well as training, preparation, and other types of employment support. So you can see how we did last year. We're on target this year, even with COVID. Although, you know, I think that in part has to do with having more opportunities to directly place people into employment, which then increases their income, which then increases their ability to get housing. So next slide. Next slide. Okay. These are the opportunity or offerings we have at each of our shelters. At the Path of Life Community Shelter, we have 85 beds. It's a low barrier housing shelter, meaning we don't have many requirements to get in. We are open 24 hours with 3 hot meals. We do 50 beds for men and 35 for women. So we are restricted to those 2 opportunities because they're in dorms. We do have openings for any gender or any identified gender as well. We do intakes daily now, 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And you do have to be an adult to stay in our community shelter, and you can stay up to 60 days, 90 days with pending housing or some other allowance. Of course, we know that was slightly extended during the stay-at-home orders by the governor, so we did allow for some folks to stay a little longer. They are eligible for 90 days per calendar year, but if they want to stay at our community or our cold weather shelter, that doesn't have the same restrictions. And then we offer case management, employment, and so on. Family shelter, the same offerings, although we have 46 beds, and we have an additional laundry facility on site. So that has made it a lot more comfortable for our families to behave like they're at their home. They get to go do their own laundry and have access to all the same resources. But we also had School on Wheels come and help with this, the children at the site, which was really a blessing to us from RUSD. So next slide. And then our cold weather shelter this year is at the Salvation Army. They are a wonderful partner. We thank them so much. It is a 40-bed emergency shelter. It is also low barrier. It is 24 hours. The way we do it is if somebody leaves, that's when the bed is open and available. So right now we're averaging almost full capacity. We probably have like 2 or 3 beds open a night. So if there's anybody needing cold weather shelter and very little time to get them in, and they're not sure if they're ready for a program, let's put it that way, they certainly can come and stay at our cold weather shelter, and it's near downtown Riverside. There are showers on site, and then we provide clean linens for all of our guests. Next slide, and I think this is where Rusty gets to share his story a little bit more.
Thanks, Casey. And I want to piggyback and emphasize back to the relational aspect of our work that we do and how unique it is to each person experiencing homelessness, each neighbor without a home. We have partnered with the faith-based community, which I would encourage you all to do because of the obvious connections they have with loving their neighbors and their mission there. The Love Your Neighbor Collaborative is a grant that we received from UniHealth, a healthcare provider looking to innovate in terms of reaching out to the least, the last, and the lost. And so we have partnerships with our universities, local universities, La Sierra University, Loma Linda, and California Baptist, who have social work interns, both at the undergraduate and graduate level, embedded in faith campuses across the city, in hotspots where our neighbors without homes are living. And so it gives us a force multiplier effect. Forgive me for my Army use of Army analogies and such, but they're a great force multiplier for us as a city and as an organization, Path to Life Ministries, in getting the need out into the neighborhoods and developing those relationships. As again, you all know, it's so important. And so having those social workers, as well as our outreach, as well as the faith campuses, the faith leaders, the church leaders, organized and supporting each other has done an incredible, it's been an incredible collaborative effort, and we've seen a lot of success through that program. So I want to encourage you all. We would love to help you start your own Love Your Neighbor Collaborative, whatever you want to call it, if you don't already have one, with faith partners in your city, in your community, and hopefully, you have universities on the desert, College of the Desert, and Cal State's out there, UC's out there. So just something to think about beyond emergency shelter. And so back to the focus of what this webinar is supposed to be is emergency shelters. Again, emergency. When I think of emergency, there's a sense of urgency that has to happen. And as the mayor, putting my hat back on as the mayor, I signed a declaration of emergency, shelter emergency in the city of Riverside. Well, a year later, I was reminded when someone died on our streets, across the street from where you see this picture, that we didn't take that emergency serious enough as a city. And I again had signed that declaration of emergency. And so I felt convicted, not only as a mayor, but as a human being, to go out on the street and to bring attention through leading by example. And so if we're going to call it a crisis, we better act like it and bring attention and focus and resources to the crisis as needed. And so I saw an opportunity and a need to go out and personally purchase this pallet shelter. It's an innovative, you can go to the next slide, an innovative approach to emergency shelter. You can see the campus now that we've created, the Pallet Shelter Village is what it's called, a cabin community that other cities like Oakland and now Los Angeles and others have created in the last few years. And it speaks to, is what I learned when I was living out there, it speaks to some of those barriers to entry that you all know about. And we heard earlier, I think it was from CVRM, or it was Tanya, maybe with the county, pets, possessions, partners. This cures a lot of those barriers to entry. They have, and it's dignified, it's private, so they have a key. And so when we on our Skid Row, which was Massachusetts Avenue, 100 individuals living there in tarps and tents and in the the gutters, when we offered them this, compared to the congregate shelter that Path of Life runs or otherwise, there were many that said, yes, of course, that's what I'm looking for. Whether it was females that had issues, in shelters before. There was a question, I think, on the chat room about how do we keep our guests safe in our congregate shelters. Yeah, that's a challenge. And some females don't feel comfortable in that situation, but they do in these because they have a key, because they have four walls, because they have privacy. And so it alleviates a lot of those barriers to entry. And, they're I think between, I'd say $7,000 a piece. So the upfront cost is, and what we did is got the faith-based partnerships that we had. Churches sponsored many of these, bought some of these outright for use by the city. It's the operational costs, as we all know, that make it expensive in terms of the services that we provide. But it's a great way to energize your community, your city, your area around this crisis that we are having. And it was a year ago that we opened these up in March, right before COVID hit, and the edicts came down, the guidance and the mandates came down. And so it's a great way to respond to COVID because of the challenges that presents in terms of separation and cleanliness and all of those things. And so I think that's probably enough. I think we had till noon. So we'll open it up to questions now, and then we can also, next slide, I think it's our just final information numbers that we provide you that are in the presentation, and then we'll take next slide. I think it says questions, and we can do that now, and then we can do that at the end as well.
Thank you, Leonard. I'm sorry, not Leonard, Casey and Rusty. I'm gonna have to get used to former mayor. I am paying close attention to the chat box. I don't see any specific questions other than lots of shout outs to your team. And we have Emma Singh with County Animal Services who, again, she always does a good job at just making known that her team is available to support if there are any needs for whether it's food or crates to help support individuals who are trying to access shelter and have pets that they want to bring with them. I will, before jumping over to the next speaker though, make one last call out from our guests. If you have a question, we would love to hear from you. Feel free to unmute yourselves at this
Tanya,
time.
there was a question about pallet shelter specifically, and you can Google pallet shelter and talk to them directly. They're a great company. I did the research and the product, testing myself, so I can tell you about the product. But they're a great company that is employing formerly homeless individuals, and now are operating and banning purchased several pallet shelters, as well as Los Angeles, I think, now has 500 of them that they're employing or deploying in their city. So that specific product and solution is working and taking shape in California. We did have some initial struggles with the square footage. 70 square foot was the minimum for California codes, and we got that changed actually through the help of the governor when he came out and visited. I actually ended up getting evicted from code enforcement. They were nice about it. The city manager ended up kind of saying, "Hey, Mayor, can you not sleep there anymore?" I said, "Okay, this will be my last night." And so they didn't have to evict me. They asked me nicely, but it was getting close to that type of situation. And so that, again, back to all of you in terms of your leadership by example in terms of the crisis and bringing attention to this, it's gonna be up to us to do that, and we're here to help you.
Great. The moment you started talking about pallet shelters, hands went up. I see Dr. Chang is on the line. He's the director with our County Behavioral Health Service, Behavioral Health Department, but is also a Board of Governance member for the Continuum of Care. So Dr. Chang, if you're ready, please feel free to ask your question.
Yeah, no, I'm sorry, and thank you, Tanya, and thank you, Mayor, and for the presentation. It's very helpful. I just have and I can look at it offline, but I'm on the website now. I'm just curious in terms of like sewer or electrical. I mean, it looks like part of it is self-contained, and the other part has like a communal area, or how does that work?
Yeah, great question. So obviously we need bathrooms and showers as a part of the program. And so those are trailered showers and bathrooms, communal, and then a communal eating space and classroom, basically, for the offices of the operators and for the work that they do in meeting the clients on a daily basis, and then an outdoor space as well for rest and relaxation and eating. So that was on top of the pallet shelters. There is a cost to providing bathrooms and showers, and probably the biggest cost to the city was tying into the water main, as you know, and the sewer. And so it was positioning is very important, and siting a community. It was nice that we had a parking lot that was adjacent to the existing Path of Life shelter, in an area that didn't have any opposition, no NIMBYs were part of that. And I can again go further into that offline, or if you want to, personally call me on the issues in terms of placing and siting a cabin community, a pallet shelter village in your city. But those are some of the barriers that we got across. So it did take a little bit of time, about 3 to 4 months, to do all of that and get it up to speed. But that's a lot faster than typical in terms of building a shelter, or going into an industrial area and retrofitting an industrial building to host a congregate shelter.
So the
Does
last question,
that answer your question, Dr. Cheng?
No, it does, and it's great. So it's modular, and they come to the site, and they're just like assembled on site, basically.
Yeah. They a pallet shelter will assemble it in a day, and level them. So what the city or community or group or church that is gonna operate these would have to figure out how to get the electricity to each of these. So they do have heat and air conditioning capability. They have electricity inside, 2 bunks, space underneath for possessions, some shelving to put some items and books and things. And so it is, a livable area, and it has some privacy. Even if you wanted to go to, 2 individuals per unit, 64 square feet is what, and that's the pallet shelter concept. And distribution costs are so much cheaper when they can palletize these and drop ship them out and build them in a day. And so that's part of the innovative and unique and simple approach to the concept.
That's great. Well, thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Tanya.
We did when we built ours. We did it ourselves. Pallet shelter couldn't make it that day, as you said. As I mentioned, I was convicted and wanted to do it that night, and so I had some of the board members and friends come, and we put the sides on wrong. So don't ask me to build it for you. Pallet shelter could do it much better. So I slept in it for a couple of weeks until they came over and repaired it. There was a little bit of fun there, but it was definitely cold. I didn't have the heat on it during the cold November and December, but I survived and I learned a lot from it, obviously, and really, anyway, I could go on and on. It's 12 o'clock, so it's the next person's turn.
You know what? We do have 2 additional questions, and I'm thinking since we have that extra buffer of time at the end for questions that we can probably go ahead and take those now. I'm sure Nina and Dominic's hands are tired. Just kidding.
Sorry.
But Nina, if you want to ask your question, we'd love to hear it. Or Dominic.
Thank you so much. No, I just had a quick question. I kind of touched on it in the chat, but regarding outside of the pallet shelter, individual shelters, what policies are in place? Rusty, you kind of already touched on this a little bit, but I was curious, are there any policies in place to make the clients more comfortable as far as the safety, the theft, and the bugs?
So there is fencing around it. So there is a point of entry and exit. And so 24/7 security is provided by the city and the operator, and then they're obviously easy to clean. So and they're not transferring bugs, at least to others. And a congregate shelter would just be an issue for that one pallet shelter. And then if it is discovered, like I said, it's easy to clean. And when somebody leaves, is up and out to hopefully supportive housing and beyond, then it just spray it down, hose it down, start over again with a new guest. So right. That's one of the innovative, abilities of this, or easy things to do. What was the last question? It was bugs and
right. I think what I was referring to was outside of those individual shelters, in the more common shelters where they're sharing the common areas. What's in place is kind of what I meant. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So the bathrooms and the showers, those are cleaned probably every day. Just typical operational costs there associated with it. And then there's the modular classroom that is operated, so that's cleaned as well. So we haven't had any issues, is the bottom line. We haven't had any issues with bugs, or I don't even know if they've had any COVID cases in the pallet shelter village. I can't tell you that. City and CityNet is operating that particular project in the city. So that would be a great question to see if it has impacted the COVID numbers compared to congregate shelter.
Thank you, Rusty.
Great. And then Dominic, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, sure. Hi, Dominic from Goodwill. And so we appreciate the partnership with Path of Life over the years and the friendship with Mr. Bailey. The question is this for all of us in the space. When folks come, they are in an emergency situation. There's a lot of triage. And we got to get them stable, but how do we focus on the transition? How do we really get a focus on, let's get their mental health on point, and maybe any kind of substance abuse issues dealt with, and then really point them towards sustainable employment? How do we make that, at what point do we really begin to not push, but at the same time push? Because a lot of times with the housing first model, sometimes it's almost a housing only model because there's not any kind of mandatory, steps towards, moving them forward. So how do we make that more of a priority? Or at what point do we begin to make that a priority?
I can speak a little to how we manage that at Path of Life. I don't know how other groups do. Although I hope that we're all doing whatever we can to address those questions. We have our own internal employment and behavioral health programs that do come into the shelter regularly, particularly our shelters. I shouldn't say necessarily, because we also offer that to our housed guests. But we don't require it. And I think that that's kind of where, I'm not sure that we can necessarily go out of our way to require them to take advantage of these services, but we often offer them through our case managers, which we call navigators, obviously. So those sources and resources are constantly offered, and we see a good number take us up on the offer. But again, like you said, it's a very short period of time that they're in our shelter. So we have a very short period of time, and it can feel maybe a little bit overwhelming to some of our guests. So we try to allow them to take their time to reach out to us as well. So we have a separate behavioral health team from our achievement coaches. Our achievement coaches or our case managers focus primarily on resourcing and then offer the other sources of employment. And then our team for employment comes in and offers some opportunities and some classes and some groups. So I think it's a matter of just having those sources in-house. But again, when you're talking about trauma isn't something you can fix in necessarily 60 days or 90 days. So we're sort of the first step that we can offer those services, but not necessarily. That's why I think I even asked Dr. Chang on another meeting, how can we better address the ongoing mental health needs in our communities? And I think that's one that I know that the state and our county are trying aggressively to figure out. So.
And Dominic, I'm going to make a plug here for folks who are not already participating in our continuum of care meetings to do that. It's at those meetings where we have more in-depth conversations about what it means to truly help or support a client through our continuum. And I think we have definitely made a shift in the last several months, years, or year or so, to really ensure that when we talk about client success, that it speaks to the piece that you talked about, which is, how do we ensure that it's beyond just connecting someone to housing, but also to workforce and other income benefits or linkages to health services, such as treatment. We often think of treatment like linkage to whether it's a detox bed or another type of inpatient program. But for many of our clients who have been homeless for a long period of time, like just connecting them to a primary care provider so they could go in and get annual physical exams is major. And we are in the next at our next continuum of care meeting going to be having a focused discussion on our development of a homeless action plan that will really look at highlighting some of those measures that go beyond how many people we're serving, but how many people are we successfully assisting with increasing their income through workforce connections? How many people are we helping, connect to medical and other healthcare providers and so forth? And we'd love to have you as part of that conversation. With that, I am watching the time, and Linda Rogers has been very patient with us. Thank you again, Rusty. And Casey, great presentation. We'll jump on over now to hear about all the great things that Valley Restart is doing in the city of Hemet. But as we all know, with all of our shelters and supporting families across that come from our entire county and sometimes from other parts of the region as well.
Thank you very much, Tanya. So can we go ahead and hit the next slide? So we were incorporated in 1990, and I've been here since 2003, so a little more than 17 years, and learned a lot about homelessness and what it is that we can and can't do. We are a 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week shelter. And originally we were doing 35 beds because of a need that I want to talk about later in this presentation, and with the help of the HEAP money that has come through, we're reconfiguring so that we're going to be able to increase our number of beds to 49 and change our focus to families. Our success rate over the last 10 years has been somewhere between 84 and 96%, depending on how motivated our residents are to move to self-sufficiency, and what we see is, are they moving to a higher level of housing, and that means not back to the street, and not into a motel. So they could be reunited back with family members, or in their own apartment, or in shared housing. We have a motto, next slide please, to teach, to train, and to restart lives. And what we want to do is entice people. I really liked the question about how do we get people to move beyond just being housed to want something more. And I think that comes from establishing a relationship with each of the prospective residents. And in that, it started to raise the question, and that was what started this whole workshop, was what about those people that we couldn't shelter? Because I will say in the cul-de-sac of Hemet, we ended up with people that we weren't able to take care of because we didn't have enough beds, and that was a concern. So we looked at our statistics of who it was that we helped and who it was that we couldn't help, and where they came from, and it will be a part of the slide presentation here. Can you go to the next slide, please? So you may be able to find your city on here. These are the people that were not housed. There were 157 single people that came and put in an application. They were interviewed, and we didn't have space for them. So they could be on our waiting list, and we gave them referrals. They were all welcome to eat an evening meal with us every night, and prior to the COVID season, also to shower. The concern that I have was that 45% of the people that we turned away as not housed were families, and that included 92 children. Next slide, please. So the next slide talks about the people that we were able to house, and 54% of those were families with 66 children. I wanted to be able to show our access, so they can make an application Monday through Friday between 9 and 12 with a California ID, and we have, I'm sure similar to all other shelters, a waiver that is available if they don't have an ID themselves. We do an assessment to see what is it that they need so that we can set them up and connect them to the resources that are in the county. We would call these the essential and basic resources. And then we look for what other resources do they need to have. We are uniquely located in that we are directly across the street from the Department of Behavioral Health on one side, and across State Street, we have the Workforce Development. We're about half a mile away from the welfare office, and directly behind us is the the courthouse. That also includes pediatric partners and other medical professionals. So when they wanted us to move, I was aware of why all of those doors were closed, and we are where we are with no residential neighbors and on our own piece of property. Next slide, please. It's a fine line between what is mandated and what is offered, and I think that through the relationship that our case managers have from the very beginning with a client, we try to let them see that their potential is so much more than what it is that they came in. They came in as something that was broken and in dire need, and we were able to show them that it was possible to get all that they needed to have, and some of that is about holding them accountable. So they meet with case managers once a week for a weekly progress report, but they meet with case managers daily as to what it is that they're going to do in the day in order to help move themselves forward from homeless into self-sufficiency. We have a life skill specialist that assists with job readiness and searching, but also with motivating the residents to deal with and resolve the barriers that they have to being self-sufficient and therefore being successful. The next slide, please. This is a picture of our property, and I'm looking at one where it has congregate housing, and I'm really glad that she didn't put that in because we don't have that. Our piece of property was originally built in 1941 for migrant farm workers, and then it became the YMCA of Hemet until we bought the property in 1995. All of the family units are separate, though all of the bathrooms and the showering areas are shared. And that means that a family can go in and shower in the evening, that whole family, and then leave. But each room does not have a bathroom or a showering area. We have a multi-purpose room where people have their meals, and there are 3 meals a day that are provided. And we have I think that one of the key things that we do is encourage people to save money. And I really like that they save money in a safe that's in my office, so that they are not spending money on something that they don't need, because we try to provide everything that they could possibly want to spend money for, with the exception of cigarettes and alcohol and drugs. We have, I think that we have a very good ratio of staff to clients that make it able for people to get the support and encouragement they need, as well as sometimes a direction of structure where they may be lost. Next slide, please. So we have several components, like the other shelters that have given their presentations. We have an outreach and navigation office that is open every day, Monday through Friday, from 8 until 4. We have a bus ticket home program. I think many of you have received our flyer for that. It has to do with when people are displaced and they have somewhere else that they could be, with a guarantee of somebody who will accept them and care for them in this transition to their next place of stability. We can send them there either by bus or by Amtrak. And then we also have rental assistance program that is funded through the FEMA or the Emergency Food and Shelter Program. We have a community evening meal that is provided to the residents as well as to what we would call the visitors. And those meals are provided by the area churches. We have between 35 and 40 churches that come to the shelter utilize our commercial kitchen, cook the food, and prior to COVID season, also served and were able to fellowship with the people. But because of the COVID restrictions, they can come and cook. They then leave and we serve the food. We have public showers prior to COVID, and we have ordered a portable public shower to be available, particularly to those people who are living on the street and who are not interested in the structure of the shelter. And we're looking forward to it coming, but somebody must have thought that portable showers were going to be very important, because we've been waiting for 3 months and we have another 2 months before ours is being built. So kudos to all of the people that think cleanliness is important, but I wish that our name were closer to the top of the list. We have a number of volunteers that help us in our front office, and one of the things that they do is deal with the California ID vouchers and the birth certificate waivers. And I would say that we probably do about 7 to 12 of those a day. And I think it's a great service that we're able to do, thanks to the state allowing us to do that. And I think that having access to California IDs opens the door for people to receive services, whether it's from the welfare office or from just even simply getting a free phone. The next slide, please. I don't think that we could do much of what it is that we are doing without the partners that we have. So we have the area churches that not only provide us with meals, they also assist at fundraising. We have many of them that give to us on a monthly basis. And they are also excellent at being able to give us the hygiene products that we need for our residents and for those that come to take showers here. Behavioral health being across the street is extremely convenient, but more than that, they're being able to connect up with our navigators and outreach workers has been critical. The city of Hemet has a homeless outreach team, and they are good at being able to come and do 5150 assessments when I would say people who come onto our property are in need of that. And one of the things that they also offer is that they have a behavioral health specialist as a part of their team, and they specialize with children. So when we have children who are acting out because the children have some kind of a severe mental illness, often the officer will come and be able to calm them down in a way that I thought no uniform could ever do that. Just an amazing compassion comes from these gentlemen. We have 2 groups, Just Serve and Golden Era Productions, that are an example of many, many hands coming together in order to be able to assist us, whether it is for our yard sales or for our large fundraising events. California Family Life is located about 1 block from us and is an excellent resource for young adults. Between the ages of 17 and 24, they can go and get their GED there and also get a paid internship. Creates an independence and also a connection back to finishing school, which we all know is so crucial. We participate also as a member of the Hope Collaborative. One of the things that is very important to us is family reunification, and anything that we can do to assist that, we want to be a part of. And so many of our families are reunited here. They start out as couples with, whether it's with supervised visits or overnight visits, and then to having the family being reunited after the parents have completed everything. Some of our food gifts include, we pick up Pizza Hut and Starbucks every day. And so that becomes a part of the meal program that is offered. So when people like pizza, that is an absolutely great thing. We also we serve breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and those help supplement that. The next slide. That we also have partners within the community. We sit on the Continuum of Care and also on the Board of Governance. We are a part of the City of Hemet's community resources for homelessness. We have a staff member that sits on the coordinator system, and we participate in HMIS and Home Connect, and then count on, again, on behavioral health. Next slide, please. One of the things that when I came to this job, it was for 30 days, and I said, what could I show you in 30 days? And they said, we have money for 30 days. And at day 31, there was $1,500 in the bank and $22,000 worth of bills. And so I understood what they were talking about. And here we sit a little more than 18 years later, thanks to the funding sources that are on this page. So that includes the city community development block grants and the county block grant, the emergency food and shelter program, the emergency solutions grants, both local and from the federal. And then Supervisor Washington and his CID grants has been very helpful to us for years. And then we have private donations, and we have fundraising programs that go on. So, and then probably the latest for many of you who are listening have been able to take advantage of the HEAP funding, and we're looking forward to the HAP funding. So we have some new things that we have never thought were possible. We laughed that we used to be an agency that shared paper clips. Like, if you're not using this paper clip, can I borrow it? And we now have funds where we could each have a paper clip of our own. On that, I'll close. If there are any questions, I'm open to answering.
Great, thank you, Linda. You're also getting shout outs in the chat box. Rusty Bailey saying, Linda, love your story and candor. I'm going through, at this time, if there are any guests who have a question, we'd love to hear from you. Feel free to unmute yourselves.
Before we do, I do want to make an announcement that I have shared some flyers in the chat box that you're welcome to download. I will also upload those on our website along with the webinar for today and the presentation. Those flyers that I attached are tips for being out in the cold weather, our warm center directories in both English and Spanish, the Home Connect flyers in English and Spanish, as well as a flyer on our cold weather shelter.
Thank you, Melanie. I think in addition to Rusty, I want to give a just huge thanks to Linda. A few weeks ago, we coordinated a meeting with a city who is interested in opening a new sheltering program, and we reached out to both the city of Riverside and Linda to coordinate a special training in order to provide a broad overview of what it takes to operate a shelter, and she shared a similar presentation to the one that she used today. So thank you, Linda, for doing that. It's those types of partnerships that we at the Continuum of Care and at HHPWS hope to facilitate. And my hope is that we can continue to strengthen those partnerships and develop new programs enhance existing programs so that we can continue to expand our reach. If there are no questions, then I will go ahead and wrap us up again by, first of all, thanking you for your participation at our highest level. We had 57 people in attendance, which again just speaks to how important each of you have found these webinars to be. So I'm really, truly happy to hear that. Thank you for participating. Please don't hesitate to reach out to us at coc@rivco.org if you have any ideas, suggestions for improvement. We are here to support you. To our emergency shelter providers who spoke today, you guys are awesome. We appreciate you. And thank you for all that you do. Keep up the good work, everyone. Stay safe, stay healthy. We will see you at our Continuum of Care meeting next Wednesday from 10 to noon. And then we have our Board of Governance meeting next Wednesday as well from 3 to 5 p.m. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.